Welcome to today's expert webinar brought to you by getAbstract. For those who haven't met me yet, my name is Ramona. Thanks for joining the session today. I'm talking to Alexsys Thompson, who is a pioneer in the leadership space. She's an executive coach, and Alexsys worked at the Center for Creative Leadership and still is a member of the Forbes Coaching Council. Also, she is the author of the best-selling book, The Power of a Graceful Leader. And she is the host of a podcast by the same title. Welcome, Alexsys, to our session today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining in. So this is not a webinar only for managers and executives. It is for everyone who's searching for meaning and inspiration, really. And today we are talking about bringing gratitude, grace, and love to work with the ultimate goal of aligning yourself with your purpose. Alexsys, the term grace usually isn't to be found in business literature. What made you choose that term and how would you define it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I chose it because it's what showed up. It was I did a lot of research, and it's the thing that kept showing up as like an amoeba. People couldn't get their arms around it or define it, but we knew it when we saw it or we felt it. And so it was an attempt, this is an attempt, to have quantification around what it is to both be internally graceful and moving in the world with gratitude, as well as being able to witness when someone else is doing so, either to learn or to pick up some tips and tricks from their experience as they lead their own life. And so that was the kind of the why. And through the science that I was studying at the time and the hundreds of people that I have the privilege to work with up to that point, it was the theme that kept presenting. It also was a little before its time, about a year and about 18 months, because when I went to talked to a couple of publishers, they're like, we love the book, we just need to change the title. And I said, yeah, no, this is time for grace to come into conversation. And so that's why we're here. And how I define it in the book, because most people would say it's not a business term because they would put it in the religious sector. And it definitely has its place there for sure. But in this particular context here, the grace is defined as a compassionate experience of self. It could be called self-love, self-awareness, but it's a relationship with yourself. And when you put that relationship in alignment and in action, that's putting gracefulness into leadership. And it can just be leading your own life or leading hundreds or thousands of people. And either one or all of those things are grace in action.
Yeah. The getAbstract editorial actually put your book in the corner of mindfulness. So this is also how I read your book. It's really also a mindfulness book. So most of us can relate to the sense that we are showing up as different people at work and at home. How do we hold ourselves back when we don't bring our whole selves to work?
Yeah. That I get reminded of that on the daily, both with myself and with the people that I'm coaching. And just yesterday, I had this really lovely conversation with a gentleman, and he presented something about who he is as a caring leader and kind of heart-centered. But I think most people, when they experience him, wouldn't use those words necessarily to describe their experience of him. It wouldn't necessarily be bad, but it wouldn't have been deep connection either. And so I think that that's the bridge that we're being called into in this world. There's a lot going on. We're inundated with a lot of information. And so when you can bring the compassionate part of who you are and the interconnected human part of who you are with all of its foibles and all of its amazingness, and really just honor that and present it in a more unified way in all parts of your life, not just home to work, but work to home as well at times. It gives you a better, I've experienced and received much feedback that it's just a better quality of life. It's the ability to not have to have multiple masks or ways of being. And I also want to caution that we also have situational awareness that plays a role here as well, right? You're not going to necessarily be the same you and everything, but the main threads that make you who you are get experienced by everyone. And hopefully those are the higher level callings that you have as a human being.
Yeah, and like presenting yourself as a whole self also reflects directly on your performance, right?
Oh yes, Yes, for sure. It gives, when you can take some of the tools, like for example, that make you successful at home, and maybe some of your things that are your passions, let's say, and say your work is more of a job, for example, than it is your passion, and that's okay. But if you
Hmm.
can take some of the energy that's your passion and import it in some way into how you do your work, it becomes contagious. And it's a
Yeah,
really lovely work environment with your mates.
yeah.
Yeah.
Many employers feel that they are confused about how much they want or should share about their personal lives and feelings at work. What's your
Yes.
advice on navigating this question?
Yeah, so slow and steady wins the race here. If you were a person, and I've seen this and I've done this myself at times, that is a little more reserved or quiet or introverted, and then the next day you go to work and it's all out there, like a floodgates are open, it's startling not just to you, but to everyone that knows you as what they think they know you as. So I think a healthy way to do that is find some trusted advisors, some people that you feel safe extending yourself slowly with, and then as you become more confident in that and you're getting healthy feedback, you can then kind of roll it out over time to more people. So your psychological safety is just as important as someone else's. And that's what I would like to see you preserve in that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
A question that I find very important, and we hear that a lot, is about work-life balance. Do we achieve actually a better work-life balance by aligning who we are with what we do? So here again, purpose comes into play.
Yeah. So I think this is a really catchy thing right now, with, do you know your why and all the things. And I would say some people early on in life, their purpose has been clear. That wasn't the case for me. I had to really work at getting through some muddy should haves and could haves to get to what do I really want rather than what's being layered on me. So I think that's part of the process. And to just be gentle with yourself, but be committed to the journey, and the timeline you have is going to be different than the timeline I have, and that's all okay. I just, as you start to be more integrated and your purpose is something you can communicate, then what you will begin to find, which is kind of magical, is that the people and the resources and the experiences that foster more of that passion about what you're here to do in the world just start to show up. And your
Hmm.
world begins to shift pretty magically. At first, you're like, okay, well, that's interesting and that's interesting. And then it just becomes a way of being. And and oddly enough, without much, I'm not saying you don't work for it because you do, but without much pushing, you'll find the universe pulling you into spaces and places where you light up and who you are is being demonstrated in what you do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very nice. I want to take the occasion to point the audience to our chat. So if you want to make a comment, if you have feedback on what we are discussing, if you want to ask a question, please do so, and we will try to address it. To come back to the question, so the answer is actually yes, we are improving our work-life balance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Could you please walk us through the concrete examples, or even more concrete examples, work-related examples, in which being graceful is really powerful?
Yeah. So in the book, there's 6 tenets, and I think that the most direct answer to this one here is the 6th one, but there is no particular order in the tenets, but it's called compassionately powerful.
Hmm.
And in this, when you're called and you start to have an awareness of experiences that you're in, where you can create a pause and you can assess, and it becomes quicker over time. It feels kind of manual in the beginning. You can assess, am I being asked to be still inside here? And is that where the power is inside this gracefulness way to be in the world, graceful way to be? Or am I being called to action? And it might be one or the other in any way, or one and then the other. But the pause is the gift. And it can be a nanosecond the more you get better at it, because I can do it very quickly now. I'm like, oh, I can see myself feeling triggered by this thing. So let me pause for a minute. Why is that? And all that's happening like very quickly, because I have a deep level of awareness on most topics, but not all topics. I still get surprised. So that power that you get in knowing, in feeling aligned to your own gut or your own internal systems, which you're bringing online through this practice, helps build confidence in a space of grace, which means to be humble and to be curious rather than the confidence of arrogance and pushiness. And we all have all those things in us. So I haven't met a person yet that hasn't been all of that at some point, including myself. So I've been pushy and demanding, as well as I've been graceful and grateful. So it's understanding what's being asked of you in that moment. And the pause is the gift to the curiosity. And that is the answer to the being powerful and knowing what it is in the moment.
All right. I'm happy to see that the audience is picking up on my call for questions. So here's one.
Yeah.
I have to rephrase. Does grace help if we don't feel seen or heard?
Oh, this is a big one. Yeah. So being seen, heard, and understood are like the reasons we exist. Those, when two or three of those things are met, we're usually functioning in a pretty high way. But if all of them aren't being met, it is extremely detrimental. And I've been there and I get it. So the first part is, again, go back to the idea that you have a couple trusted companions, not 100, just a couple, and you start to express feelings, right? And learn how to express the feeling with clarity. And I don't mean in data ways, but not such inflammatory ways. Emotions can be either high or low, right? But practice coming in the middle, not because you are, but so that the other person can receive you. Because when we come in on either extreme, it's really hard energetic exchange between two people. So the more clear you can get with these confidants about, hey, I'm feeling really excited and passionate about this, or I'm feeling really scared and unconfident in this area, which, and anything in between, the more clarity you get in your ability to convey that idea and feeling and be seen and heard, the more and more you'll be willing to do it. And then you'll take it to the next and the next. But it does take practice. And I think it takes a fair amount. I had someone ask me one time about fierce grace. And the idea of that grace is really gritty. It doesn't, we all have access to it, but it's a refining process. It's not like, oh, there's grace and I'm just that for 24/7. That is not true. And you're going to fall down and make mistakes and have to clean up some of those mistakes. And other people aren't going to know how to interact with this new way of you being with them. So extend grace to them and be in trusted dialogue about what it is they're experiencing with this new way that you're showing up. When we change the rules of our relationships, we're also accountable for being clear about what we want the new relationship to look like. And that takes practice. Yeah. It's fun, but it takes practice.
Yeah, for sure. So actually making yourself being heard and seen also helps you in building better connections with your peers at work.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, Gallup has had for many, many years the data that supports that some of the best places to work are the ones where you have a best friend, right? Like where you look forward to going to work because you can't wait to tell Susie, what happened with the grandkids this morning, or the puppy got out, or whatever the thing is about that's happening in your day-to-day life inside, but also impacting work. And so when we can be really clear about those exchanges with people, about our intentions and our emotions, things just get more fun because then we know what to expect from each other. I can't read your mind theory. It doesn't typically work for people.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Also to my experience. Okay. So in the book, you are giving some great case histories about people like Jane Goodall and Martin Luther King, great and big personalities. And they are people with a strong sense of self without being very overbearing, and also people who had that inner core of strength, or grace as you call it. Speaking of regular people like myself, how can we actually both be compassionate and powerful?
Yeah. So this was a really interesting one for me as I've been growing, and continues to be challenging for me. I'm a type A personality. I'm a driver, and so command and control was early on in my career what was modeled. And so that's what I did because that's what I learned. You repeat what you see and learn. And I can remember they're in the book, examples where I got that belief system got challenged, sometimes willingly and sometimes I didn't want to hear what it was, but nevertheless, it was both always true. that this dual thinking that I can either be really compassionate with you or be a doormat or be really powerful and be a jerk. Those things, if you really sit with a litmus test of that, aren't true. And when you start testing your belief system around some of this stuff and you just start asking, is this really true? And if it is true, why is it true? And does it have to be true moving forward? And this is one of those things. You can be extremely compassionate with a person and still hold healthy boundaries for yourself or the organization or another, and do that in a loving exchange and allow the other person to own whatever's going on for them, rather than what a lot of empaths do, take it on and own it. Like being able to be committed to the whatever exchange you're having, but not attached to the other person's experience. Let them have their own experience and let them see. Then when they feel the autonomy of that, they can bring their own gifts of the experience into the experience. And that's when it becomes really juicy and lovely and fun and honest and productive. Yeah.
Here's a corresponding feedback from the audience. Somebody who is saying that at work they cannot afford to go inward. They cannot afford to pause, and also they don't have time to listen with compassion to their coworkers. What would you respond to that?
I get this all the time. I work with senior executives, and a lot of them are in the healthcare, so they're surgeons and they're really life and death situations. It's like not a joke, right? Really it is. And I compassionately just hold the space that it's still not true. That when you, for myself and others, because I get in that same rat race of reaction, 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 but that pause allows you the opportunity to respond rather than react. And in there is the gift. And then you can decide, okay, this is a situation where I have to respond, or this is a situation where I just need to react for whatever reason. And there's an example of that in the book as well, where I didn't show up so lovely with my children one time, but I was conscious of it. And so the difference is that when you have that conscious awareness and you choose to just react, fine, great, it's a choice. But with the choice comes the consequences. And with the consequences comes accountability and responsibility. At least everybody's then in the boat together, rowing in the same direction, hopefully, and they're all going to be accountable for whatever hurriedness they're having the experience of. Because I'm not also going to say and be naive and say there aren't deadlines and there aren't metrics and all those things. Those things do exist. But equally as those exist is your possibility to take that pause and redirect your energy and time. And most of us don't do it. Yeah.
Great. But I mean, that's a very positive outlook that the possibility is there.
It is. And I actually I double dog dare anybody to just try it. Like literally next time someone comes to your desk and says, blah, 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 just go, okay, react or respond. Okay, I'm going to choose react because this feels really like the appropriate thing. Or I'm going to sit back and be responsive and say, I'm going to deploy some curiosity and say, hey, Lexi, okay, so what I think I hear you saying, give it back to make sure you got it. And then go, well, actually, based on this other information or other priorities, I'm going to need to attend to that this afternoon, tomorrow, next week. But be clear in the intention so the other person who's in a frenzy understands when you'll be available or when you'll be able to assist. And a lot of us just see Lexi coming down the hall with what we know is a frantic request, and we dodge into the lunchroom. That doesn't work.
Yeah, that's very good advice. By now, we've touched upon several of the 6 tenets that make up a graceful leader or person, for that matter. So alignment of self and soul, transparency with self and others, compassion, just to repeat some. You encourage people to start working with one at a time. We're learning by doing. How would you suggest people go about choosing what to work on first?
Yeah. So this is going to feel a little foreign because most of us, when we're learning something, we follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this book by design is breaking that way of being with learning it, with a body of knowledge. And so a really nice way to do it is just in the back of the book, I made it really easy. And there's the 6 tenets very briefly described. And you just read it to yourself or read it out loud to a partner you trust and just say, hey, I'm wondering, do I want to explore this? your body and your intuition will tell you the truth if you're listening. And so it is not designed to take on all 6. I highly recommend 1 or 2, but what 1 or 2, I can't tell you. You have to listen to yourself. And so, for example, a lot of times people will go through it. Transparency seems to be one that people pick up often because it's a good starting point for everything else, but that may not be your answer. And so you just read through them and go, okay, none of them resonate. That could be the case. Or this one's really annoying me. I can tell you the one that you don't like is really a good clue to where you should start. But all in your own way, right? But that's typically how I've learned, oh yeah, there's something there for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Becoming a graceful person or professional doesn't happen in one day. You just said it. There will always be setbacks. You have to be kind to yourself, and you have to try. So once committed to following the path towards greater integration, that is aligning purpose to action, how do you keep yourself on track when you realize, wow, this is really hard, and you know, when you start to struggle?
Yeah, I personally am going through that right now. So this is kind of perfect timing. So for me, one of the techniques that works for me, and I've seen it work for lots of other people I've worked with, is in the beginning of this process, I wrote down my own mission statement. And I have a way that when requests come for time or money or anything, there's 3 questions I ask of everything. And what I find is I typically get off track when I've forgotten to do this. Because what happens is I'm choosing reaction. Yep. And I'm out of alignment because my intention isn't connected to the activities or the way I'm spending time or money or any resources. And that's when all this consternation and frustration and all the not desired things for me show up. So I go back to my book, and right on the inside, I've written those things, and I just pause and I ask myself to be with it. And so when I do that, things get really clear really fast. So if something comes in and it doesn't serve that intention about how I'm living my life, I will say no or yes, and here's someone else or another way. But if I've strayed from it for a long time, I know I can go right back to it and clean up my world literally within minutes. Now, the conversations that have to ensue, because I've probably said yes to more things than I needed to say yes to, those can be hard. Those can be the challenge, because now I have to align my behavior with my own integrity. And sometimes that's just messy because I have to call and say, hey, Ramona, you know, I committed to do this thing. And if I'm really honest and I look at all the stuff, I'm not going to be able to keep that commitment. And here's the impact, and how can I mitigate the impact to you, and right? So those are pretty accountable conversations, but they're clean and they're honest and they're helpful. Yeah.
Now I'm really happy that you joined the webinar today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that personal story. That really resonates with me. There is a question that I see a lot in the chat. It pops up at a few places. How does gratitude come into play when talking about grace? We alluded to that in the invitation to this webinar.
Yeah. So gratitude's where I started, right? It's foundational to having a graceful center and being able to align your energy forces behind it. So I call it the entry point for grace. It is the place, if you're like, what does graceful mean? Start with gratitude. And this is where synchronicities start to show up, and where you start to find what you focusing on what is working allows you to acknowledge what isn't working. We're not trying to gaslight ourselves, but we can look at the what isn't working in the context of what is working. And then that creates more clarity, which is the key to all of this. Clarity creates intention. Intention creates accountability. And that then is an integrated life. It just happens by default. So a gratitude practice, and there's tons of science about it. You see tons of people talking about it now. And I've been doing this work for almost 20 years with leaders, and they always kind of scoffed at it. Like, okay, here's 3 things I'm grateful for. I'm like, great. Okay, now let's do the real work, right? And it allows you to reframe in a positive mindset, but not a snowing yourself mindset, not a lying to yourself mindset. What is really happening in front of you from very many different flexible points. So you have more of like a 360, at least a 180 view of it, and you're not myopically going down the road, assuming a whole bunch of things without testing your own theory. So it's foundational. Yeah.
Okay. You just mentioned a few gratitude practices. So there's, for example, journaling. There are lists. Are there some methods which are more effective than others, maybe also based on scientific research or in your own experience?
Yeah, there's lots of them. And there's apps out now, and there's challenges. We do gratitude challenges, ways to just kind of spark yourself to get back in a habit or start a new habit. One of my favorite ways is my morning chores, which people are always like, your morning chores? And I'm like, yeah, so I live on a homestead. So I'm out tending to animals and doing things like that in the earth and nature. And I'm constantly expressing gratitude for each egg I get to pick up, each whatever experience that I have, for the rain that came the night before. And what happens is it allows you this connectedness to something bigger than yourself, be it earth, or if you have a spiritual practice or whatever it is. And inside that connectedness is this ripe breeding ground for how to experience gratitude in many different ways, be it human to human, animal to human, nature to human, astrology, numerology. There's tons of different ways that people come at this. And there really isn't a right way. It's just whatever way that you're going to be consistent with is your right way. And you do that thing. You don't have to do, like, you don't have to journal every day. If that's not your jam, that's okay. But walking and out loud expressing gratitude, sharing gratitude at the dinner table, sharing gratitude as a conversation with your family and partner, that's just a lovely way of being with each other. Yeah.
For me, it's really being in nature. This is where I feel most grateful, and where I also can, formulate my thoughts in the best way possible.
I share that with you.
Yeah. There is a question from the chat, which goes back to the very beginning. Alexys, would you be so kind to expand a bit more about your mission statement, please?
Oh, sure. So my mission statement is to create safe places for souls to show up. So that is from a psychological safety, because of what I do for a living. I think you can imagine that, as well as just from a human to human experience in the ways that I connect with humans. And then also in a 3D form, up in the mountains, we're creating spaces and places for people to come just kind of have restorative energy things. But the world has lots of those things. So you can do that any way you want. Now, what I will share is my mission statement took me 6 years to get to. It wasn't, I woke up and had an epiphany. That wasn't my experience. Some people have it, and that's awesome. That just wasn't mine. Mine was gritty and funny and frustrating. I used to carry around a paragraph with me of 3 lines, and I'd read it to strangers. Like someone would say, hey, what do you do? I hate that question. So I would answer my mission statement, and they'd just be like, she's a weirdo. But eventually I got comfortable with being weird, and the conversation with people changed. It got to change though. And then all of a sudden people were sharing, oh, well, you know what I do? I'm a duh and I'm a rather than what their job title was. And that's another level of human connection with people. And it's fun. It's just so much fun. Yeah. Did I answer that question fully?
I think so.
Okay.
There's another one which is very personal. Here's a person asking, I'm curious, who is a graceful leader that you look up to personally?
So in the back of the book, I've cited several. So let me pick one of them. So there's this one person, he's not in human form anymore because he's passed to the other realm, wherever you believe that is. But his name is Kurt. And he helped me understand that as a powerful, I have something to say female, that I wasn't in the way, that I wasn't too much. And he did that in a way of loving me deeply, while also very firmly telling me, hey, that way you're doing that, people can't process it. So the way they're processing it is saying, Lexi's too much. So if you really want him to hear your message and come along with you, let's try this. So he was in the incubator of curiosity with me to help me to deploy my gifts in ways that other people were willing to more likely receive me. And I thought that was extremely graceful. And I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah. Very nice. And I think also we all would want to be that person for another one, right? It would be great if you got that feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about resilience. How can Grace help us cope better with change, and also how can Grace help us be more resilient? I mean, crazy times, right? Everybody
Mhm.
probably wishes to be a bit more resilient.
Yeah, I know I do. So, what I'll say about resilience, and there's a lot of science and some good friends of mine that have done work on this, is resilience is an internal job. And if you try to outsource your resilience, it just won't work. So this ability, this grit that I talk about, this fierceness that's inside you, it actually comes, if you think about your energy in your body, from your heart chakra and your solar plexus. That's where most of your power, I mean, there's the root chakra around creativity. But if we're talking about heart-centered way of being in the world and a way that you feel good about being aligned with humanity in the world, this is where it's happening. So I would suggest perhaps that you learn to listen to your heart and to the little niggles that come along that say, yeah, you probably don't want to do that. Or type out the email in a Word document before you hit send, or allow the emotion to move through you. We all have them. It's a lovely part of being human. And then when you're ready to share the emotion again with intentionality and compassion and clarity for yourself and others, deploy it. Again, coming back to the pause. I think that's the real gift here is grace happens in the in-between moments. It's not this big planned event. And the in-between moments are where all the ripe, good, intentional, aware work are happening. The question is, are you conscious in those moments or are you just rushing through your life?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Here is a great comment to what you said before. Here somebody writes, comfortably being weird opens life wide. I think that's very true.
I do. I do. Yeah.
There is a question that I wanted to ask you, which also seems to resonate a lot with our audience. Is there, or how can you create room for grace in conflict when things really get
Mm.
messy, when opinions,
Yeah.
clash? Can you? And if so, how?
Yeah. Yes, you can. And I would actually beyond that say you're called in those moments more than ever to do it.
Mhm.
And it's the hardest to do, right? So typically when we think conflict, emotions are at a high. They're usually opposing or they look like they're opposing. So again, and you're going to be surprised, I'm going to say as much as you can pause. And when you need space, it's okay to say to the other party, hey, I'm feeling really upset or frustrated or triggered or I don't know, angry, whatever the thing is you're feeling, and then say, you know what, in order to make sure that I'm operating at my best level in this exchange, I need a few minutes, I need a day, I need to collect my thoughts, I need to go get some data to come back and support what I'm thinking. Because you know how many people say to me, I couldn't even think about all the data I had. I was just so mad. So I just the person, and then they're ashamed because they didn't want to do that to the person. They just wanted to be heard and they wanted their idea or their position to be heard and respected, even if it
Mhm.
wasn't followed, right? That's what most of us are craving. So that's the first thing is to give yourself a break if you're feeling uh, triggered or elevated in an emotional state. Pause,
Mhm.
quickly pause. But also deploy curiosity. And this is the next best piece. When someone is reacting to you in a way that upsets you or surprises you, you're like, wow, I didn't see this coming. That happens to all of us. Drop into curiosity and to yourself and or out loud if it feels safe and appropriate. Say, why would a good and decent person behave like this? Like, what's happening for them to cause this type of a reaction to me?
Mhm.
And right there, by simply asking the question, you've created the pause.
Mhm.
And then that gives your heart a minute to your blood pressure too, probably a minute to come down, right? To get really, really clear with your intentions and say, okay, so what you just said to me is so inappropriate and I am not going to be disrespected in that way. So I'm going to remove myself from the situation. And I would be happy to reconvene this when we feel like we can both demonstrate some respect for each other. That's a totally appropriate boundary.
Mhm.
Many of
Yeah.
us won't do. You know, this is where shame and blame start to show their ugly head. And those things don't exist in the light. So the more you'll talk about it calmly and with intentionality, love and respect, the less it will incubate and become this ugly monster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand, definitely.
Yeah.
Here's a question from the chat, which kind of goes in that direction, but it's a different facet of the topic. Somebody's asking, in a new role, how can one establish their influence and leadership without being too forceful?
Perfect. So the first 30 days, you ask a lot of curious questions and be careful how you phrase them so you aren't pitting yourself as knowing something, well, back in the old day or back in the other job, or, be careful not to do that. Just be really curious to seek to understand why things are happening the way they're happening. Specifically, if you don't understand, be vulnerable with not understanding. How did we get here? Why did we do these things this way? Help me understand. So that's the first 30 days. You shouldn't be changing anything. You should really be seeking to understand. Even if you've been doing this job for 28 years, you didn't do it here in this culture this way. Okay. And then after the 30 days, you should begin to understand who are your informal influencers. All right. And start to understand those people and how is it they gain that informal authority that they have in the organization. Are their intentions to elevate or to diminish? And start to really create relationships that are appropriate there so that you can start sharing your message and your intention with informal authority rather than top-down authority. And then day 90, day 91 is your big moment. You get to come out and say, hey, here I am. So thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing all the things. I'd like to share some of my observations. And then be in dialogue about those. Let people poke holes in those and be willing to then be the student again. And then as the leader, go ahead and say, thank you for all of that. And we're going to forge forward this way. And that's a really healthy way to create willing participants in a new organization.
Awesome. You just mentioned workplace cultures. So in the book, you argue that if a critical number of people is acting with more grace, it can truly transform a workplace culture. So how would you implement grace as a guiding principle within an organization like bottom to top then?
So the first way that lots of people have done it when working with me is they learn what grace is for them. That's step one. And it shows up differently in the body, and everyone will know it when they see it, but it comes through in different ways for different people. And so you do you, boo, is what I say. You do you, boo. You figure you out, and then start deploying yourself in a graceful, respectful, loving way. People will start to pay attention if it looks different than the current culture. If it doesn't look much different, great. You can deploy a graceful conversation pretty quickly. But if it looks different, give people time. Again, a simulation, right? You don't want to startle the culture to be wrong. You want to influence the culture to move with you. And that takes time, which can be hard when you're lacking patience and you're excited about something, right? And so just be willing to go slowly and steadily and continue to be you, unwavering in the essence of coming from a place of love and respect for everyone in the organization, including you. So that's going to be practicing healthy boundaries, honoring other people's boundaries, understanding when those boundaries seem to be opposing, to move through to collective solutions.
Here's a lot of feedback in the chat. I just want to mention that people are saying this is great. It resonates with them. So thank you for sharing, everybody, and for commenting.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. Thanks for being here.
Alexys, we talked a lot about learning, about setbacks, about adjustments. There is also a learning message in your book, which I love, by the way, and I would like to quote it. So anyone interested in self-improvement should constantly be learning and reading, is what you're saying. Books, audiobooks, podcasts can open new avenues of thought. Even books that don't fully resonate with you will likely provide insights you'll apply at some point. I bet this is personal experience. Do you read a lot? How does lifelong learning come into play when we are talking about grace and also gratitude?
I am an avid learner, so and it keeps me young, which is a good thing at this point. I try to keep everything nimble and flexible. And so what happens is I'll be presented, even in the homesteading adventure, this is a way to do regenerative this and that. I don't know about those things. So I go in deploying curiosity and seeking to understand. And it's really helpful because it allows me to be graceful with myself. As sometimes I want to know it all, right? Like I have a hard time being a student again. It's challenging to admit you don't know anything about something you don't know anything about when you know so much about the things you do know so much about. But I know way less than I do know. And so, like, for example, when we talk about just the state of the world and starting to trying to understand other cultures or opposing sides on a topic, I haven't watched the standard news in 26 years. I go curate on both sides of the issue, and then I have like a stream of things in the middle that I think are a little bit more balanced. But I'll take it all in, and I will sometimes adjust a limiting belief I have. Like I've had a few that have got blown out of the water in the past few years with COVID and all the things. And I was like, I'm so sure this. And then, oh, yeah, no, I don't know anything about that actually. And there's a humility that is leads you back to your grace center and leads you back into that awareness that learning offers if you're willing to be a student. Yeah.
Thank you for elaborating.
Yeah.
As we are coming to a close of the session, let's sum up again the 7 tenets which define a graceful person.
Yeah. So like when you think about the tenets, there's the, like, I'm just going to show it because in the back of the book or on my webpage, I can't ever get it in the camera. It's a cheat sheet, right? I need those in life because there's a lot going on. So the 6 tenets, I'm going to state them to you, but please don't assume they're in an order. They're however you want to receive them. And this book is designed that you take it, you might pick up one and go, I'm going to work on this. And then you put the book in the back of your bookshelf. And then 6 years later, you're a new you. The book is going to interface with you differently. And you're like, I did that one that long time ago, but boy, this one, oh, I really need this one. That's what it's designed, how it's designed to work. So there's integrating mind, body, and soul. That's one tenet, and there's a lot of supporting bullets there. Evolving alignment of soul and self, transparency of self and others. That seems to be a big thread during COVID, for sure. It was interesting. Connecting self and universe, so connecting yourself to something bigger than you. You can call it whatever you want. Co-creating, this is where innovation comes in, and you co-create with other human beings, with nature, with another system, and you experience life and ways of being that you couldn't do on your own, right? Moving from I construct to a we construct in the universe. And then our favorite, compassionately powerful. And this is where you explore the idea that the dualistic thinking that we've all grown up with to label things and judge things to move through the world, which isn't bad, but oftentimes doesn't serve, where you can test that theory about how can I be both compassionate and hold my boundaries and my power at in the exact same moment. And that has been for me transformational beyond belief. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing. Alexys, thanks for being here today. I really enjoyed that conversation very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Dear audience, thank you so much for watching and for commenting. There were many more questions. I hope that we almost, touched upon all of them somehow. If not, you are, of course, welcome to get in touch with Alexys. So you will receive the recording. First of all, you will receive the recording of the session within the next few days. And if you have questions, as I said, don't hesitate to contact us at corporate@getabstract.com or get in touch with Alexys. It's alexys@alexsysthompson.com. And for more relevant content on today's topic, please check out our channels, mindfulness, life advice, leadership. So there is much more out there for you to explore. I'm wishing you a very great rest of the day. For some of you, it's early, so there is a lot of the day left. I'm looking forward to seeing you again, and I'm just wishing you the best with all your efforts. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.